How's the audio, gang? Can you all hear me? We're live, and if you're watching the recap, then I expect that there'll be a little bit of a delay in getting started. I'm not in a new studio or anything. I am in my office, but I threw this bed sheet up behind me, and I'm trying to get the level good so that you can get the top of my head and my whole face in here. Can you guys see me all right? Is that good? What is this here? Share screen. Can I do that? Ooh. No, not a tab, a window. Let's look at this. Oh my. Isn't that lovely? See what we have here. Can scroll there. I've never actually done that before on a live stream. That's pretty cool. 3 whole viewers. Everybody, if you're in the chat, sound off. Let me know how it's going. Let me get over here on Twitter and spit off there that we are live. I will find the share link, copy link. We are live. And my son is listening to the stream in the other room, so it's funny to kind of hear myself delayed. What's up, buddy? He knows to be quiet. No, do not tag people. It's just a few minutes into this thing. Pretty exciting. So I didn't do this last year. I just did a post on Substack, and I realized I kind of missed it. It's fun to jump in on here, and I've had up and down numbers with people who tuned in and chatted and stuff. And last year I just was like, okay, well, I'll write it up and I'll do it over on Substack. And I was like, no, it's fun to kind of sit there and talk about it on the stream. So without further ado, now that we're 3 minutes in, here we are. This is the annual recap of everything that I read in 2025 by the numbers. As you can see here, this is the Word document that I've used to track it all. I have done it like this since 2009. Why did I start doing this? Because when I read Louis L'Amour's autobiography, which I keep right here in a cubby on my desk, Education of a Wandering Man, he tracked the books that he read. And I remember in 1 year in particular, it was some insane number. It was like 130 some odd books that he read. He's like, yeah, this is what I read in that year. And he would keep a list, by hand in a notebook or something. And I remember thinking, I want to beat that. Granted, there are some qualifiers on that because his number was in like the 1940s or something. And he'd read a lot of dime westerns, but he would also read historical classics and stuff. And me in 2009, I was reading, some of what I was doing was audiobooks, and some of the books were also shorter, but then I was also reading like massive epic fantasy. So it's not exactly a one-to-one comparison, but I was tracking it to see if I could read as much as he did with everything else that I had going on in life. I was working 2 jobs. I was sort of doing college. I was trying to get a girlfriend and get married, and I was trying to get into publication and all that stuff and still read at the same time. And I found the whole process. It scratched some itch in my brain. And so I've done it every year since then. Since I'm sharing the screen, is that going to pop up there? No, it's not. Let me show you this since I've got Word open. If I hit open on this folder and browse here, you can see it'll pop up here in a second. Oh no, it's not. I've got it all the way through 2009 to 2026 now because I've prepped the list um, for next year. Usually by putting together a list of stuff that I wasn't able to get to this year. As you can see here, I've got stuff that I wanted to read, but I just didn't work it into the rotation. So, it is what it is. But, well, here are the totals. I think the only total I didn't write down, 39 to 48. That means that I read 10 books in June. Month by month, January, I did 9 books. In February, I only did 4. I read 10 in March, 5 in April, 10 in May. So it was really up and down. June, I read another 10. 15 in July. July was a busy month. 7 in August. I slowed down. 9 in September. In October, I read 11. 15 in November. That was a busy month. And so far, I've read 11 in December, but I don't reckon that I will read any more before the month ends. Right now, I'm working on a 40K book called For the Emperor. It's the first in the Caiaphas Cain series. There's nothing wrong with it. I enjoy it well enough, but I find myself tapping out of it every 20 to 30 minutes while I'm listening to stuff at work, and I jump into other things. Like, it's fine, it's good, and I'm liking these 40K books, but it's just not grabbing me the way that the Lucille von Schard books did, or the Eisenhorn books did. Those were really good. So I'll knock it out and I'll have an opinion on it, but I'm probably not going to get to it before the end of this year, which, whatever. So those are the month by month breakdowns. It looks like 15 in November and 15 in July. So those were the 2 months that tied. And then, February was a bit of a tap out. My total was 32 in print and 84 audiobooks. And out of the print books, some of those were comic collections, trade paperbacks that have multiple issues tied up in them. They can be, 120 to 160 pages. So if you look at what I read in a year and you say, oh, Graham, you read 116 books, that's an insane number. There's an asterisk on it. It's easy to read at that kind of volume when most of what I'm reading is audiobooks, which is a function of the job that I have, where I spend a lot of time by myself in the truck behind the windshield or in the trailer working. And I can just have an earbud in and I can listen to something while I work. So there's a drawback or a cost, I guess, to all of that. Yerba mate. Love me some mate. So there it is. And then in terms of like the actual nonfiction or novels or prose stuff that I read, it's going to be a smaller number. Nevertheless, I've read all of these books and I can have a discussion about them. I learned from them. People want to argue about whether an audiobook counts as reading. Don't care what you think. It counts. So now into the book by book portion of our program. Now we're 8 minutes and 20 seconds in. I started off the year by reading Deus V Machina by David Cullen. He's a YouTuber who does a lot of culture commentary and movie reviews. I've unsubscribed to his channel since then just because he became like a lot of other culture critics where he had a lot less enjoyment of things, and he just kind of bandwagoned onto the negative side of it, which I guess if you're going to be a full-time YouTuber, that's what the algorithm rewards. I didn't really care to keep watching videos like that. His book was fine. Did a video about that one. Storied Independent Automakers, by Hyde. That's probably the third that I've read by him. He's an historian from Michigan who knows the history of different car companies. And that one focused on the lesser known companies like AMC, Rambler, and all that. Goliath by Scott Westerfeld. That's the third of the Leviathan series. I've read that trilogy probably at least 3 times now. It's illustrated in print. And so I've read those in multiple media over the years. I got into the first one when it came out in 2009. And I've just loved them ever since. Alternate history, kind of sci-fi of World War I, but there's sort of steampunk / genetic engineering. Like the Allies have Darwinist machines. They're genetically modified animals that they ride into combat. And the clankers, like they have trains and mechs and stuff. The main character is a fictional son of Franz Ferdinand, who's on the run from the Kaiser's forces that want to quash Austria-Hungary. And the main female lead is basically like a Scottish Mulan type. Like she's hiding as a boy in the military because she wants to fly hot air balloons. Really, really great trilogy. Dinosaur Hunter by Hickam. Homer Hickam, that's the guy who wrote October Sky, the former NASA dude. He's written a couple of thrillers and stuff. That one was fine, wasn't bad. On Settler Colonialism by Kirsch. That was recommended to me by my friend Dan, which was an examination of a cultural and academic phenomenon that is, we'll say, anti-intellectual amongst other things. It took me a minute to want to read that one just because it was, even though it was a bit of a short volume, it was kind of a heavy subject. But it's one of those that I think it's important to understand the framework of certain bad faith arguments that are very prevalent in the national discourse right now and have been for a while. The Hard Way by Lee Child. That's one of the Jack Reacher books. This was the year that I kind of tapped out on Reacher. I might have gotten to book 11 or 12, and they've become similar, reliable, but all similar in a sense. They're good if you're looking for one exact thing, and I wanted that in kind of smaller doses, so I'm kind of done with those for a while. The Blood is the Life by David Carrico. Pretty sure I did a video on that one. Main character is a vampire, but he's Jewish and serious enough about his faith that he grapples with the need to consume blood to live, because eating blood as a foodstuff is contrary to the law of Moses. So that's just the start of the story. From there, it's him, kind of learning how to not only cope with his situation, but figure out what his purpose is going forward ever since he got turned into a vampire. Number 8, you can see there on the screen, says Worlds Without End. That was a beta read for a friend. And so I won't say anything about that one until it comes out. Hereticus by Dan Abnett. Speaking of 40K, that was the 3rd of the Eisenhorn books. Really, really great series. And that wraps up January. Going into February, like I said, only 4 of those. Levon's Trade by Chuck Dixon. What was that movie? There was a movie that came out. Jason Statham. He's had like 3 movies this year. A Working Man is what it's called. It's based on that book. I haven't seen the movie yet. I've heard that the ending of the book and the ending of the movie are different, which is good, because I really didn't get into the ending of the book. Like the way that it ended, I was like, yeah, not for me. But I've heard that the ending of the movie was better, so I might check that one out. And then Blade Runner by Philip K. Dick, which I believe the original title of that was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And I decided to read that one so that I could, eventually get around to seeing the movie. I know it's sacrilege to say as a fan of science fiction, but I've never watched Blade Runner. I've never seen Blade Runner 2049 either, because I figured, well, I should probably see the first one first, and I haven't either. So read the books so that when I do eventually get around to seeing the movie, I'm prepared for it. It Wasn't About Slavery by Meacham. That's the same guy who wrote the biography of Nathan Bedford Forrest that I read a couple of years ago. That was very good. We got a message in the chat from Ben Kirkham. Says the movie's better than the book. I expected as much. I had problems with the ending. So if the movie's better, then I'll give it a watch. I think I saw that it's on Prime. So we'll see. If it's on, let me know what service it's on, Ben. Anyway, book 12 that I read this year, It Wasn't About Slavery by Meacham. So I've been reading a lot of Civil War books over the last 5 years, and there are still arguments to this day about, what it was really about. And, here's what this side neglects, here's what that side neglects. Meacham is obviously, more amenable to the Southern side. I don't think that he is so at the expense of facts, but he highlights things that don't get a lot of play in the overall discussion of it. And he's at least fair in explaining, like, this was what the North was really after. This is what the South was really about. Like, you can't remove slavery from the equation of the cause of the Civil War. It wasn't the only thing, but there was more to it going on. I read it to see what his thesis was. I found it illuminating in terms of facts about the cause of the Civil War that I didn't know about. And he's a very, what's the right way? Like, he's a very readable writer. I really, really loved his book on Nathan Bedford Forrest. This one I think was just fine, and I'd continue to read other things by him. And then in February, Absolute Batman completed its volume 1 arc. Probably wasn't in February. It would have been, it was sometime around there. It completed volume 1. I really liked volume 1. Volume 2 just wrapped up, and I liked that one too. Volume 3, the Absolute version of the Joker is just not doing it for me. BR is currently not streaming, so your options are renting or sailing the high seas. Blade Runner. I'll probably check it out from the library then. All right, so that gets us out of February into March. I was rereading the Hunger Games books. I must have reread the Hunger Games in 2024. So I reread Catching Fire in March. Mech Bunny by Anya Verdon. I actually don't remember much about that one. Independent mecha sci-fi type book. Mockingjay, also by Collins. That was me finishing the original trilogy. Roadside Picnic by the Strugatskys. I did a video on that one. What I mainly remember was that the concept was interesting. I don't think the execution really went anywhere. The idea is that aliens visited Earth during the time that the USSR still existed, and they landed in Russia and Eastern Europe. And they left some debris behind, and it's radioactive and toxic to us, but that makes it valuable to scientists. So there are guys that go into these radioactive alien wastelands to find things, and they have some crazy experiences, and that's it. Like I said, the idea is cool. There's not much of a story there to sink your teeth into. It's kind of anthological in nature, but there's not really a through line to it. It's just like, oh, wouldn't this be weird? Yeah, it would be weird. 250 pages of wouldn't it be weird? Anyway. And then in March, I finished my reread of Witchy Eye by DJ Butler, which is probably the third or fourth time that I've read that. Just checking the score real quick. The Colts continue to break my heart. Why not? It's what they're good at. 17 seconds left. They just gave the ball to the Niners. This is why I'm not a sports bro anymore. And then volume 1 of Absolute Superman and Absolute Wonder Woman came to an end. I've stopped reading Absolute Wonder Woman. Like, it was fine. Volume 1 was strong. Volume 2 really lost my interest. Absolute Superman has been awesome. Volume 2 of Geiger also wrapped. That's the Ghost Machine title. And then I finished this volume 2 of Louis L'Amour's Lost Treasures, which I did a video on back in October. I got volume 1 up here as well. That's going to be the target audience for these collections is either completionists or aspiring writers who want to learn from his style. And then I closed out March by reading Sunrise on the Reaping, which is the latest Hunger Games book that came out. I didn't go all the way back and reread. I always forget the title. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because I read that one a couple of years ago. I've read that one twice now. So I didn't go back to reread that one, but I read Sunrise on the Reaping, and you've seen my videos on that one. It's just fantastic. I love what she's doing. In April, I read Terminal Man by Crichton, which is this year I've also been reading a lot of his books that I hadn't before. And that one was adequate. This year I established kind of a 3-tier system for ranking books. Tier 1 is I really wish that I hadn't read this book because it was terrible. Tier 2 was I read this book, it's fine, I probably won't read it again. And then tier 3 is I read it, I loved it, I'll read it again, I want more of it. I put Terminal Man on tier 2. I can check it off the list of Crichton books that I've read. It's fine. Starship Troopers by Heinlein, that was a reread, and the last time I read it was 2012, and I enjoyed it then. This time I appreciated a lot more of the deeper aspects of it. I did a video on it. Heinlein is just freaking brilliant. Starship Troopers is great. Tier 3. After Moses by Michael F. Caine, because he's not Michael Caine. That's a really cool sci-fi that he's had a lot of success with. I think there are 6 books in it by now. I've just read that first one. The title refers to a new way of calendar reckoning. There was an AI that popped up at some point called Moses, and it caused so many problems that humanity basically has a Butlerian jihad. And in the future, when there's spaceships and terraforming and Firefly type stuff, they reckon the calendars by after Moses, like a time after the AIs. Really, really cool series, or cool first book. I haven't read the rest of the series. Fire and Brimstone by Michael Punke. That was about a Butte mining disaster. Did a video on that one. I didn't expect to enjoy that one as much as I did, but it was a very good book, nonfiction. The Magos by Dan Abnett. That was the 4th and final of the Eisenhorn books. Didn't enjoy it as much as the others. Still good, but Xenos was still fantastic. Malleus and Hereticus were very good. This one kind of works as an afterthought, but I didn't get like as hyped on that one as I did with the others. And then we get into May. Inheritance Games by, I believe this lady's name was Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I'm pretty sure I did a video on that one too. My wife liked that one, and I think she's read all of the sequels. I think there were pieces of it that I liked, but not enough to keep going. As far as kind of like YA mystery type books, there were some tropey things that it did, and there were some other things that it did very well. I thought the ending was a little bit deflating. It didn't, like, there was a cliffhanger, but it didn't hook me, so I didn't keep going. Just Stab Me Now by Jill Borup. I've done a video on that one. It's one of those neat meta level books. The book is about a writer writing a book, but you get the parts where the writer is writing the book alongside the book that she is writing, and she's having arguments with her protagonist, and it's very, very well done. Check out my video on that one. She's a YouTuber who went on to have success with the YouTube side of things, but she wants to be a writer, and she also tests medieval armor and swords and goes to Ren fairs and stuff. So she knows how to do the things that she's writing about. But that's in addition to all of that stuff, she's very good about the writing side of things and the humor side of things and the romance. Like, there's a whole bunch of talents that she brings to bear to write a really, really well done book right there. Superman Red Sun by Mark Millar. That's a graphic novel from at least 20 years ago. Did a video on that one. I really, really loved it. I think there's an animated like DC video about it. I'll probably check that one out and watch it just to see how much of it they were able to fit into the runtime. The basic gist of it is that Superman lands in the Ukraine in 1938 instead of Kansas, and so he's raised by Soviets instead of Americans, and you get to see how that whole thing plays out. I won't spoil the ending. I will say, though, that it basically dooms the entire world to an endless time loop of the same things happening over and over again, in a way that I didn't expect. I didn't see that one coming, but very clever storytelling and a clever way to flip that trope, or flip those established elements on their head. By the Great Horn Spoon by Sid Fleischman. The first of 2 books that I read this year about the 1849 gold rush. Did a video on that one. Really, really good middle grade book that it crosses those quadrants that it makes it accessible to older readers, even if you're not a kid. I believe it was written in the 60s. Really, really well done. Last Stand, also by Michael Punke, the guy who wrote Fire and Brimstone. That was about a guy named George Grinnell who, through decades of activism and work, he was able to kind of turn back the tide of efforts in driving the American bison to extinction. So not only is it a snapshot of one particular series of events in the late 1800s, it also gives you a broader picture of that time in general, but focusing on the through line of what caused their population to go on the decline. There was a federal policy for it, but that wasn't the only factor. It was kind of riding alongside several other factors. But he gets into all of that. Really, really good book. Astrobots Volume 1 by Simon Furman. I got to admit, I really wanted this series of comics to be better than they were, and they probably should have been better than they were. Simon Furman has decades of experience writing Transformers comics. And this was his own creation where it's set on a different planet in the future, and there are good guy robots and bad guy robots. It's like, hey, you should know how to do this. But the storytelling was a little bit jarring, and the storyboarding for the art didn't work so great either. I bought the first 5 issues, and I got the second volume on my pull file at the LCS right now, and I'm pushing myself to complete it because I like Furman and I want to see that it's going somewhere. But if this volume 2 doesn't conclude a lot better than volume 1 did, I think I'm going to tap out on it, which is frustrating because, obviously I'm a huge fan of Transformers and I like robots and I want more robot comics. And this book has every reason to be better than it is. And there are parts of it that are great, but I want it to come together better. Law of the Desert by Louis L'Amour. I read that one. I had never read it before, and so now I get to kind of check that one off. Return to Sender by Craig Johnson. That was the Longmire book for this year. Talks about him kind of going undercover, taking a job as replacing a missing mailman out there in Wyoming, and this mail car driver has like a 300-mile route delivering to rural spots in Wyoming. He's got to figure out how she disappeared. And then I finished Lost Tales Volume 1 by Tolkien. I'm not going to read... Sorry, I got like my mustache is freaking tickling my nose. I'm not going to keep reading those only because they're basically like these lost treasure books by L'Amour. They are like earlier drafts of stuff that ended up in the Silmarillion. And so there are annotations by Christopher Tolkien about like, okay, when he says this, he means this, and it was changed later to this, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, this is for real Tolkien diehards and scholars and stuff. Like I'm not getting anything out of this from, the lore or what have you, the way that I did when I read the Silmarillion. So I'm not going to worry about carrying on with those various prior editions of Middle-earth legends. And then New Trail of Tears by Naomi Schaefer Riley. That one, that's a nonfiction about basically what's the cause of a lot of misery on Indian reservations. Her conclusions, I believe, are valid and accurate and also will be wildly unpopular. So they should be implemented, but maybe they won't. I don't know. Read the book and make up your own mind. Excuse me. That gets us out of May and into June. Hunter Ninja Bear by Chuck Dixon. This is a graphic novel. I backed it on, I think, like Indiegogo back in the day, and I was looking up campaigns that I'd backed and be like, okay, maybe I should read this book or review it. I backed it at the PDF level, and the PDF that they sent me was all corrupted. I was like, all right, whatever. So I found a copy of it cheap on eBay. It showed up and I read it. Blew my mind. Cool story, awesome art. Did a video on it. Fantastic. Biography of John Wesley Hardin, autobiography, Civil War guy. Not remembering a whole lot of particulars. I feel like I did a video on that one. It was fine. Rogue and the Savage Land, that was a mini series of X-Men comics that started strong, fizzled out near the end. Art was cool. Thief Taker by D.B. Jackson. I was looking for fantasy fiction set in the American Revolution, and that was one. It was good. It was probably tier 2. I don't know that I'll read it again, but there's a series, so I'll probably read a sequel next year or so. Did a video on it. Volume 3 of Transformers by Daniel Warren Johnson. That one concluded, like Volume 3 wrapped earlier in the year. Really loving that series from Skybound, the Energon universe. Oh, that is the wife coming home. The wife, the superlative wife. One wife to rule them all. One wife to bind them. She can bind me in the darkness whenever she wants. She's not going to like that I said that on stream. I digress. Hey, did the Colts score any points before halftime? Probably not, because they know I want them to, and they do nothing but let me down. Anyway, Void Rivals Volume 3. I tapped out of Void Rivals. It's another Energon Universe title. I've talked about that one. Started strong, fizzled out, blah. Freedom Fighters, Rise of a Nation by Venditti. I read that one because it was a series of cheesy comic characters from the 70s that DC ended up acquiring. And, one character is Uncle Sam, and it looked like it fit the aesthetic of an America book, but there's not a whole lot you can do with that character and in his supporting cast, and it was kind of bland. A Land So Strange by Resendez. I believe that was the story of Cabeza de Vaca, which he was a Spaniard that kind of got captured by Indians and stuff, and he talks about his adventures in the 1500s in not necessarily in the Gulf, but in the parts of North America surrounding the Gulf of America. Interesting book. Big Sheep by Rob Cruzy. I know I did a video on that one. It's a bit of a noir, a bit of a mystery, a bit of a cyberpunk, but he's really good at blending those elements together. Tenure 2 by Mike Barron and Blaine Pardo. I really liked the first one. I really struggled through the second one. And I did a video on that one, and I compared it to another book that had a lot of the same issues that I found. We talked about that. That gets us through the first half of the year. All right, July 15th, Automaton by T.R. Hudson. I'm in a writing group with Mr. Hudson. Writing group. It's a GC, and all the guys are really high on it. And I read that one, and I kind of talked about it. I blind itemed it in a video, and said that the only reason I didn't do a full review and name that book, by name, was that the content was, for most of the book, it was kind of dancing around my line, and then in the third act, it went completely over the pale, and there was something in it that I was like, okay, I can't recommend this to my audience just for that one thing. Nevertheless, it was the very, very rare example of a guy who put something extremely graphic and harrowing in a book, and there was at least a reason for it. I'm still not going to recommend it, but he wasn't doing it just for its own sake. Strong concept, and for an indie writer, his prose is very, very good. But there was a scene at the end of that one. I was like, okay, yeah, pass. 1776 by McCullough. That was a reread. I hadn't read that book since 2007, so I decided to reread it. And then I finally finished that George Washington biography written by Washington Irving. However, I read the abridged version by Charles Neater, so it wasn't the full version by Irving himself, which that biography by him was actually 5 volumes long, so I haven't read the whole thing. I just read an abridged one. Nightland Racer by Fenton Wood, did a review on that one. It's somewhere in between. So his book Hacking Galileo I really loved. His Yankee Republic series I've kind of fizzled out on. Nightland Racer is somewhere in between. I finished it. I liked it. Tier 2. I would definitely read Hacking Galileo again. Nightland Racer was fine. I'd recommend it, but I probably won't grab a copy from my own library. Diarist by Vitanza. Tier 1. That's all I'm going to say. Super Generation. That's the Raconteur anthology that I'm in. I sold a short story to them last summer. It was edited by Hinckley Correa, and mine was the second story in there. It was called Last Flight of the Gargoyle. I read all of the other stories in there, and there were some really, really good ones in it. I talked about that. Butler by Selena Zito. She's a journalist who was in Butler, Pennsylvania last summer when Trump got shot, and she had a lot to talk about in that one. Good book. Gardens of Mars by Gimlet. Okay, so that's it's a history of Madagascar. And the only reason I bought that book was I was originally planning on doing this sarcastic Count Dankula style history of Madagascar, because if you've been in his comments, one of the writers on his staff wrote a script for a video called Madagascar is Weird. And Dank has talked about it, and he says that he read the script and he's not going to do the video on it. And now all of his viewers are like, no, you need to do the Madagascar video. So my plan was to read this book about the history of Madagascar and then write a script for a video and do it in a Count Dankula accent. But I feel stupid just thinking about that. The book was fine. I'm not going to do content like that. Always with Honor by Pyotr Wrangel. I finally finished reading that one. He was the last noble White Russian officer to fight against the Bolsheviks and the revolution. Completely hosed by his own government, but he stayed loyal to the cause and loyal to his men, and they were loyal to him in return. Really, really good book. I reread Jurassic Park by Crichton. Still as awesome as it ever was. Hornsby and Halo by Peter J. Tomasi. I finished volume 1 of that. It's another Ghost Machine title. Volume 1 was strong. Volume 2 just started wandering out in the weeds, so I stopped reading it. But I liked where he was going with it. I don't like where he decided to keep going. It just got boring. Dreams of Golden Fire by Fred Phillips. I did a video about that one. It's a Raconteur Press boys adventure novel. It'll be the Aragon for this new generation. Good dragon book. It's a story about kind of consequences and everything. Pandemonia by Johnson Riggs. I did not do a video on this book. It is without a doubt the most unhinged thing that I've read this entire year. Just absolutely demented. It's one of those books that as I was reading it, I'd turn a page and I would just look at it and go, holy dude, what? It's a satire. It's a parody. It's a parody of reality. It's a parody of medieval fantasy type stuff. That's all like a thinly veiled commentary on the current events of the world that we live in for the last 5 years. The tagline is a novel plague novel. There are COVID jokes, there are Trump jokes, there are Middle Eastern terrorist jokes. It's all set against the backdrop of this fictional pseudo medieval kingdom. I didn't do a video on it for the same reason that I didn't do a video on Automaton by T.R. Hudson. There were things in the content that were a little bit beyond the threshold of what I like to read and what I'll recommend to my audience. But much like T.R. Hudson, Johnson Riggs can actually write. His brain is just a bag of cats. Holy crap, that book was insane. But he sent me a review copy, and that's my honest take on it. So hey, if your threshold is farther than mine, by all means, give it a shot. Where am I? Butler, Garden of Mars. Oh, geez, I skipped over Captain in Calico by George MacDonald Fraser. So I was listening to an episode of the Gopherwood Lounge with, I believe it was DJ Butler, and I can't remember who he was talking to. It would have been either David AF or Tony Daniel, one of the other guys at Arc Press, and they were talking about books that have made an impression on him. And I've heard of the Flashman series by George MacDonald Fraser, but I hadn't read any of them. And so I looked at what my library had audio wise. They had Captain in Calico. I did a video on that one. It was good. Kind of historical fiction about an actual figure. So that's book number 57. You can see right here. I went straight from the Madagascar book to the Russia book, but yeah, Captain in Calico right there. G.I. Joe Volume 1. I think they were getting ready to wrap Volume 2 by July. I must have just not counted that one, so I put that one there. And then Boy's Own Starship by Nuttall. That's another one of the Raconteur Boys Adventure books. It was good. Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs by Brusati. Probably tier 1. There's a lot of interesting tidbits in there. There were a couple of weird pieces of commentary that are sticking out in my head, but it's one of those nonfictions that shows that the field of paleontology is not only young, but still changing, and significant changes are happening in it. We're constantly adjusting what we do know, or what we can at least theorize about ages past in the planet's history. And it constantly reshapes what we think we know about dinosaurs. Airframe by Michael Crichton. That's a thriller of his I'd never read before. Awesome. There are intersections of media and law and tech and labor disputes and all of that stuff, as this woman who works in quality control for an airliner or an aerospace company which is not Boeing, She's trying to figure out what went wrong on this one flight where there was suddenly a bunch of turbulence that killed a couple of people and hurt dozens others. It should have been impossible, and so she's trying to figure out what's going on against the backdrop of the company possibly selling overseas, and laborers wanting to revolt in Los Angeles and blah blah blah. Just an awesome book. Cold and Mortal Spring by G. Scott Huggins. That's probably the third book that I've read by him, and the first in a Flintlock fantasy series that he's doing. I did a video on that one. It was really cool. Voices from the Confederacy by Meacham. He's the same guy who did the slavery book and the Nathan Bedford Forrest book. That was kind of a collection of letters and accounts from soldiers who fought. Summer of the Monkeys by Rawls. That's apparently, there's a movie based on that one. I'd never heard of it, but I really liked it. It's set here in Oklahoma in the late 1800s. Pretty sure I did a video on that one. Really good. Not Stolen by Jeff Finn Paul. I've talked about that one a couple of times in different videos. It basically takes the entire America is stolen land bullcrap, to task with receipts, and explains like, no, it wasn't stolen. It was purchased by and large. He's honest about where like the government and the army did go wrong, but the modern day narrative is a revision to the point of dishonesty, and he methodically deconstructs that entire argument. Through the Lich Gate by Adams. I believe I was given a review copy of that one, and I reviewed it alongside Necromancy the Musical by Debbie Hibbert in October. It was fine. Inexplicables by Cherie Priest. That was probably the second or third time I've tried to read that book. Her Clockwork Century series is cool in concept, but every time I've taken a run at it, my takeaway in the end has always been like, I wanted some more action. I wanted something more to sink my teeth into as a guy. It's, this is not a dig. It's just an observation that, these are books written by a female author, and I think they would be more appealing to a female audience. Whereas, if I wrote that as an action-centric guy, I would, kind of punch up the excitement and have that play more of a role than just, characters walking around having discussions with each other and, healing their past trauma and, airing out their grievances and what, like, give me some more adrenaline. That's what I want out of a series like that, especially if you're going to have zombie Bigfoot during a protracted civil war. Lost World by Crichton, sequel to Jurassic Park, still awesome. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt came recommended to me by a friend. I've read Jonathan Haidt's books before, and that one's a lot of really good parenting advice in there. Behind the Veil by Lydia Scherer and John Ringo. That's the third in the Transdimensional Hunter series. Did a video on that one. It is excellent. I'm going to own all of those in my library at some point. I read volume 1 of Shelby Foote's narrative of the Civil War, and I'm definitely going to read the other two. They're just, very long and detailed and dense. And so, I'll pick one of those up maybe once a year for a while, because it takes a while to get through them, and I don't want to just blitz them. I want to digest the bits and pieces of it. And then Transformers Volume 4 wrapped up. That was the Energon Universe comic. Daniel Warren Johnson did it for the last 2 years, and that was the conclusion of his run. Robert Kirkman's taken over now. I love it. It's one of my favorite comics that I'm reading right now. 5 Decembers by James Kestrel. Brett Kane got to interview James Kestrel on the Ironside podcast, and that interview got me to check this book out, and I'm glad I did. I read it, and it was just beautiful. Did a video on it this year. It was the rare kind of literary fiction / procedural / historical fiction that it wears a lot of hats, and it wears them all beautifully. Incredible book. I've Got This by Key. That's another Raconteur Press boys adventure book. Well done. Convoy of Chaos by Sam Robb was in that one, but it was an anthology, so I don't remember the names of the other authors that were in that. That's the one that got me to read, it got me to look up the Car Warriors Auto Duel Chronicles. I've since gone and read the first one. Convoy of Chaos is the 6th one in the series, but like I said, it's an anthology. The other books have single plots in them, and I read the first one. I really liked it. I love the setting. Give me more muscle car fiction, please. That's all. That's right up my alley. And that reminds me, David J. West and DJ Butler both have a book coming out together in June, and I remember them talking about this for years. I'm going to switch the screen that I'm sharing here. Check this out. I'm sharing that for a second, and I am going to share this. So, Baen Books said they could share today. The cover finally came out. DJ Butler, David J. West, the Silas Danger run is what it's called. The first book is called Hell on Wheels. Drives a Goat, which I can get behind. And then, we got to sell books, so we'll put a halter top and some Daisy Dukes on there. But yeah, David and David are both on that one. This thing could come out for $30 in hardcover in June. I'll be there to buy it. Just super excited about it. Cover art is awesome. Yeah, like I said, they put this book together a couple of years ago, and it's one of those that ended up in like maybe not development hell, but like contract hell. And now it's finally moving forward, and I am ready for it. Give me more muscle car fiction. So in that, and let me share this screen again. Give me that. Yeehaw. Here we go. Boom. Convoy of Chaos. Okay, that gets us into October. Admiral of the Ocean Sea, the defining biography of Christopher Columbus. Cristobal Colon. Did a video on that one, 15 minutes long. Everybody should read that book. Prey by Crichton. That was a reread. I haven't read that book since it came out in 2002. Did a video there. It was one of the rare books that he wrote in first person, and I really feel like he was working through his own divorce as he wrote that book. Academy of Outcasts by Korea. Did a video on that. Korea could write anything and I'd read it and it would be good. This is him writing a progression fantasy, and once again, like he makes it good. Children of Húrin by Tolkien. I love reading Tolkien in autumn. It's just perfect for me. Next year I'm going to read Fall of Numenor. He's always got another book that I haven't read, and so I'll pick one and put it off for the next year, and next year it'll be Fall of Numenor. This year I read Children of Húrin in all its detail. I read the chapter in the Silmarillion called Of Turin Turambar, which kind of gives you the overall story, but Children of Húrin gives it to you all in detail. And then Absolute Batman Volume 2 wrapped up. That's Volume 1 was him fighting basically the Black Mask Mafia. Volume 2 is him fighting Bane, and there was some insane story beat stuff that happened in there. Volume 3 is going to be him facing off against the Joker, but issue 1 of that third volume showed this absolute version of the Joker. I don't like it. It's too weird. Absolute Superman 2, though. Absolute Superman continues to be freaking awesome. Like, there are some little hiccups here and there in the narrative and in the storyboarding, but overall, like, flawless. I love Absolute Superman. I'm a homer for Superman, whatever, don't care. I am, every month when that book comes into my pull file, I am stoked. The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Spears. Did a video on that one. Second book by her that I've read. Really good historical fiction set around the Salem witch trials. This one I don't think was Salem proper. It was some other, Boston Puritan thing. Really, really good. And then I reread General Stanwati's Confederate Indians by Frank Cunningham, which I hadn't read all the way through. Did a video on that. Land of the Ill-Imagined by Alexander Robb. I got a review copy of that one. It was fine. Tier 2. Basically, it's hell for fictional characters in books that don't really get fully fleshed out. Friend, the screen is black. There we go. Sorry, chat. I didn't realize that I was having screen hiccups there. Familiar Spirit by DJ Butler and Aaron Michael Ritchie. That's the third in the... Why am I forgetting this dude's name? The Cunning Man series, but that's not what it's called. Like, I forgot the main character's name. Stupid. Hiram Woolley. I should know. Remember, that's like one of the most Mormon names you can have. Great end to that trilogy there. Necromancy: The Callback by Debbie Hibbert. Debbie's a friend of mine. That's a sequel to the book she had. Her debut novel came out 2 years ago. That's the sequel to it. It's a good follow up to the first one. I did a video on that. And then November, big month here. Here we go. Saints and Strangers. I finally got that one finished. I bought that in May and I picked at it over the summer, but I didn't have a whole lot of time to sit down and do any physical reading. I wrote 3 books this year. And so that's got a lot to do with why I didn't read more in print, especially with a book like Saints and Strangers by George F. Willison. That's a 450-page book that does not read fast. And so I was picking at it here and there in chunks. And when I finally got to the end of it in November, it was just excellent. It's out of the 20 or so books that I've read about the Mayflower and the Pilgrims, that became my favorite one. Sigils by Sam Robb, did a video on that one. Love Letter to Pittsburgh, good urban fantasy. The Biography of Washington Irving by Brian J. Jones, I really liked that one, did a video on it. The Winter Soldier by Ed Brubaker, that's the comic run that created the 21st century version of the Winter Soldier character that was then adapted into the Marvel movies. Really good run in the comics, and it was nice to have that Marvel Premiere Edition that has the whole story all together. Thanksgiving by James W. Baker, book 96. That was the nonfiction that was like the history of the holiday itself, through all the iterations and all the different celebrations that made components of the holiday. Paradiso by S.A. Oliver. That's the sequel to Die Rock 88. I still don't think I've done a video on Paradiso. That's a really good space opera. I think, like, again, flaw is the wrong way to say it, but like the only complaint that I would make about it is that again, it's female author writing in a way that would be more appealing to a female audience, in the sense that it's slow, and slow is wrong. Like it's not in a hurry. The overall concept is cool. The execution is cool. It's very interested in its own characters. But there are rewarding developments along the way, and there's a big couple of events that happen in Paradiso that, like, when it all came together, you're like, oh, holy crap, like, this is really, really good. Car Warriors 1, that's the first of those Auto Duel Chronicles by Roberts. That was good. And then Rising Sun, another Crichton book that I had not read, and when I did, it was one of those 90s thrillers that he put together that was full of nonfiction, hard science, actual events, geopolitical stuff that I didn't see coming, and I loved his execution on it. The American Indian, a Slaveholder and Secessionist by Annie Eloisa Bell. I did a video on that one. They don't teach you that Indians were slaveholders prior to the Civil War. Granted, it wasn't that many of them, and for a lot of them, it was a habit that they adopted from the whites. But whoopsie. 101. I read I listened to the full cast audio Harry Potter book that came out last month. I liked it. It was good. I'm glad that I got that one from my library. The second one just dropped last week. I haven't listened to it yet, but I liked that first one. Camp of the Saints by Jean Raspail. I did a video on that one. Very challenging book, but very meaningful and important in a lot of ways. I hate describing a book as important, but it asks you an uncomfortable question and demands an answer. And oh boy. Unmasked by Andy No. I tried doing videos about that a couple of times. It's a hard read, and I ultimately decided not to do a video on it. But holy crap, that dude really has suffered over the years to get the complete story on Antifa. That was a gut grinder of a book. Acceleration Clause by Rob Cruzy. I did a video on that. It's the first in his Ransom's Law series. He's working on the other ones. I crowdfunded the series last year. I'll get them all as physical books eventually. He sent me the ebook, and I did the Speechify thing. It was good. Dust Sacrifice by Larry Correia, illustrated by Alex Wisner. That's the American Paladin graphic novel. I got that. I really, really liked it. Good story, great art. And then in November, I finished Switchblade Shorties by Ed Piskor. I did a video on that one. It was fine. It was probably tier 2. he was an extremely talented artist. What a loss. That gets us into December. Rocky Mountain Christmas by William Johnston. I did a video on that one. It's kind of like a Hallmark book in print. I liked it. I'll take a few jabs at it, but it's wholesome and it's very readable. It's good. I got to the end. I will be reading these cowboy Christmas books that he does for the next couple of years. Outgunned by Flowers. That's the 40K novel. I did a video on that one, and it did numbers, as the kids say. People do be liking 40K books. Desert Horizon by S.A. Oliver. It's the same girl who did Die Rock 88 and Paradiso. But this was a modern day thriller, and she was able to transcend kind of the tropes of the genre with some of the things that she did in the execution of the book. History Matters by David McCullough, kind of a swan song book by him, compiled by his daughter and his longtime editor and a couple of other people. It's a bit of a sampling of different takes that he had on different subjects. Really, really good. In the Language of Adam by DJ Butler. I didn't do a video on that one just because it was so incredibly niche, but this is a somewhat amateur but very qualified examination and a theory on practices of the visionary men of the Book of Mormon and the things that they knew that we know now about temple worship. Dave isn't just a guy who has ideas. He's one of those kind of self-taught scholars who learns old languages and studies esoteric practices. And if he's got a theory, he can support his theory with details and evidence. And I thought this was a fantastic analysis of a very my mind is blanking on the word. Occult subject, in the sense that it's a lot of what we would want to know about it is hidden. But he has some very convincing theories on that. Hercule Poirot's Christmas by Agatha Christie. I did a video on that very recently. Battle for Christmas by Steve Niesenbaum. My video on that one, I kind of piggybacked off of with the video for James W. Baker's Thanksgiving, because both books were detailed histories of the origins of the holiday. I just saw this funny meme that I had to talk myself out of spurging out on it in the comments, where somebody was like, the most wonderful time of the year, there'll be parties for hosting and marshmallows for toasting and caroling out in the snow. And then, some guy just doesn't know what Christmas is about, so he makes up random lines and he says, scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago. We don't think of Christmas as a time when we would tell ghost stories, but for a very long time and at its origins, it was. And Stephen Nissenbaum talks about that particular aspect of the early versions of Christmas traditions in the book, which explains a lot about why Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol as a ghost story. It was true to the roots of the holiday. Really, really intriguing book. And then to round it out, 3 comics that are wrapping up. Redcoat Volume 2 concluded. Geiger Volume 4 concluded. Those are both Ghost Machine titles in the Unnamed War. And then No Man's Land, which I have not finished yet, but it comes out this week. The 4th issue of it comes out this week, and I'll read it, and that will conclude some reading that I've done for the last 3 months. It's a 4-issue miniseries that'll then compile into a graphic novel / trade. Intriguing concept. It's set during the final days of the USSR, and an FBI agent is dispatched to the Diomedes Islands in Alaska, which are, there's Big Diomede and Little Diomede, and they comprise the border, they constitute, the border between the USA and the USSR. And for 3 months out of the year, the ice, or the water between these two islands, is frozen over into a solid sheet of ice. And so the imaginary line that is the border between these two superpowers is right there on the ice between these two islands. And this FBI agent is sent out there because a woman was killed and her body is found right there on that line in the ice. And so an FBI agent and a KGB agent have to work together to figure out what was going on before the ice melts and before other implications come into play. The final issue is coming out this week, and so I counted it as read only because I know that I'm going to I've read it all when all is said and done. Right now in print, I am reading Humphrey Carpenter's biography of J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm about 40 pages into it, and just snatching snippets of it here and there. It's not very long. It's only 250 pages or so, which I like. I'm sure that you could write a multi-inch thick biography of the professor, but I like that it's a little bit more readable and that it's paced well. I'm already getting into his boarding school years. His parents have both died. He's being taken care of by the parish priest at the Catholic Church and such. So there that is. And then, like I said, I'm picking through that. Gosh, I don't even have it written on here. For the Emperor by Mitchell. That's the first Caiaphas Cain book. And then I've got, let me blink that out because that is a review book and you're not supposed to see who that's by. Whoopsie. Last Stands by a guy named Michael Walsh. That's not connected to the Last Stand book that I read by Michael Punke. This book, this Last Stands book, is about why men choose to fight to the death. And he talks about famous instances of this throughout history. So I want to read that. And then Days of Rage by Burrow, that talks about the political terrorism in the United States in the 60s and 70s that has largely been overlooked and forgotten in the modern day because a lot of those people who committed those acts got pardoned and then got tenure at universities. So I want to read details about that. And then I've got some other hefty reading to do, but I won't get too much into that subject. So now let's go ahead and stop sharing. The Colts are down 11. Why wouldn't they be? So that's what I read this year. 32 print books, most of which were comics or graphic novels, and 84 audiobooks. What is next year going to look like? Well, let me give you a few other lists here. So I reread 11 books. Is that what I'm looking at? 9 books. Goliath, which was a reread, Catching Fire and Mockingjay, Witchy Eye, Starship Troopers, The Inexplicables, Lost World Jurassic Park, and Prey by Crichton. Those were all books that I'd reread, and I'm trying to cycle more books into the reread side of things because I've read a lot of great books, but as you can see, like Prey and 1776 was a reread. I'm doing fantastic here. It had been a long time since I read them, and I wanted to read them with fresh eyes. These are books that I hadn't read since my teens or my 20s, and I'm in my 40s now. So why not revisit something that I liked before? My best of year books. This is why don't I go ahead and share my screen again? And let me put it right here. My best of year books were Sunrise on the Reaping, Red Sun by the Great Horn Spoon, The New Trail of Tears, Hunter Ninja Bear, Airframe, Not Stolen, 5 Decembers, Admiral of the Ocean Sea, Saints and Strangers, and the Washington Irving biography. So you've got a good mix of fiction, nonfiction, some were audiobooks, some were print books, some were comics. A little bit of everything made the best of year list. This will all go live tomorrow on Substack on truckermanreads.substack.com. Let me go ahead and drop that in the chat. truckermanreads.substack.com. It should also be in the stream description, but whatever. Pin message. Yeah, message pinned. Subscribe there if you haven't. That's where I do some of the reviews that don't end up here, or other pieces of commentary that don't end up here. But that'll have links, and it'll also link back to the videos that I did that kind of described what I really, really loved about those books and what made them stand out amongst the other 100 and some odd books that I read this year. I will read all of these again at some point. It's been a couple of years since Hunter Ninja Bear came out, and I don't think Chuck Dixon has written any others, but it's fine if he doesn't. It was, Provenance was the name of that book, and it was billed as like a first of whatever's to come. Maybe it didn't sell really well. That's fine. It concludes beautifully. I really enjoyed it. So those are the final stats for the year. And rereads best of what is to come in 2026. Well, earlier this year, we got a treadmill out in the shop. Wife likes to use it. I like to use it. I used to get 20,000 steps a day at my job, but my routes have changed a little bit. I don't get as many. And so, I'm getting home a little bit sooner. And I still like to go out and, get my 20K in. It helps to kind of keep me from getting too robust. But today I went out there with my paperback copy here of the Federalist Papers with the intro and the notes by Charles Kessler, recommended to me, this particular edition, by the esteemed Dr. Bradley, my brother, who does in fact have a PhD in political philosophy. We're going to be reading this one kind of together alongside each other. He's doing a podcast. I'm going to do my own reading of it. I'm going to be taking notes, and I'll be doing entries over on Trucker Man Reads about it with just my thoughts and my observations. But today, while I was out on the treadmill, I decided to take this out there, and I read Federalist #1, which is written by Alexander Hamilton, and he's a bit of a dry writer. And I forced my way through it, and I was like, man, this is like swimming through spackle. I hope the entire series of articles isn't like this. Then I got to Federalist 2, written by John Jay, and he is a much more readable writer. And I even enjoyed reading it aloud while I was, walking on the treadmill. I was like, shoot, I can probably stream these on Twitter or something. They have those Twitter spaces, like the audio spaces. You can kind of broadcast a podcast, as it were. It's like, shoot, maybe I'll do that as like the research phase. But throughout the first 6 months of next year, I'm going to read all 85 Federalist Papers. And my summarizations and my notes and my commentary will go live on the final Friday of the month. It'll be Federalist Friday. So I'm covering that. I also have this kind of novelty book that I got from Barnes & Noble. It's the U.S. Constitution and Other American Writings that I'm going to pick at here and there. There's 47 of these. I'm not going to read every single one of them, but I am going to read most of them and do videos on each of them. It starts out with the Mayflower Compact. I've already got a video on that one, but I'll probably private that one and do a new one with more detail. Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Treaty of Paris, the Virginia Plan, significant American documents. It's got the Social Security Act in here, the Civil Rights Act, the Homestead Act, Jackson's notes on Indian removal, the North Atlantic Treaty, Brown v. Board of Education, significant American writings that have shaped their time and the succeeding decades. I'm going to read some of these that I have not read before in their entirety. I'm going to have thoughts on them, and I'm going to share them here and also on Trucker Man Reads. This one I'm going to pick at throughout the year. I'm not going to blitz you with 48 articles in the first 2 months. These will be paced out. In fact, since I know how to share my screen now, and I'm a complete nerd. Is that blacked out, Ben? Or do we have it? There we go. Here's what I've got. I'm doing inaugural addresses. I'm doing the American documents. And then on Saturdays, I'm doing a recap of what happened kind of live every week in 1776 as part of like the 250th celebration of America. Some of this is going to involve Googling. I've also found some almanacs that I'm going to use. I'm going to kind of summarize these events in my own voice. I'm not doing any like, hey, Chat GPT, give me a script that I can read. Like, I'm capable of writing my own stuff. But this is what the channel is going to look like next year. Obviously, I've got some blank days here. I'm still going to be reading fiction and doing review copies and stuff. But a lot of those blank days there, like the Tuesdays, the Wednesdays, a lot of the Friday stuff is going to be for me to cover the fiction that I'm reading or the other nonfiction projects that I'm reading, unrelated to all of this, or do, recaps of books that I've already read. Like I'm recapping the Longmire books and the Land and Sea books. And I've got some plans to do recap videos for Monster Hunter because we're getting 2 Monster Hunter books next year. And so I'll do recap videos like I did with the Son of the Black Sword series, the Forgotten Warrior series. Those did well and people found them useful. So I'll be doing things like that. I'm not really focused on getting to 100 books this year. Like I'm not aiming to get to a certain number. I'd rather read bigger books more slowly and digest them at pace and kind of challenge myself to do things a little bit differently than I have in years before. I've also got, let me cut this, you can see it. I've got this book, The Landmark Herodotus, also gifted to me many moons ago by the esteemed Dr. Bradley. And I've marked it, broken it down into sections because ever since I did that last year with the Silmarillion, I realized like this makes a complex book more easy to process for me in terms of its size and its scope. I also like that this edition is annotated, so you've got the big paragraphs in there, but here's a summary over all of this big old paragraph. It's like, okay, if I know that I'm only gonna, if overall I need to read this to understand that all of this is more or less saying this, it's like, okay, I can kind of bracket my brain to process this larger idea and then digest the smaller details about it. This helps me to understand and retain more of that information. So I haven't broken down an exact schedule for when I'm going to read Herodotus, but I've been meaning to read this, and I even took a run at it in 2016, and I got probably about a quarter of the way through it, and then I got sidetracked with other stuff and never picked it back up again. But Herodotus is a guy whose name I have encountered through other pieces of nonfiction that I've read over the years, and it's like, man, I really need to get back to this one. My brother gave this to me when I was into epic fantasy in like 2010 or something, and he wanted me to kind of catch up to his level of reading, as it were. And it took me a while to get there, but I'm at a point now where I'm reading the kind of stuff that has interested him since he was a teenager. It's why he went on to get a doctorate. Me, I've kind of always had my head in the clouds, but I'm finally at a point where I can appreciate things like this, and I really want to tackle them this year. I'm not getting any younger. And, as has been the case for about 5 years now, I really like, reading stuff and sharing it with you guys here. I used to share it on the podcast before Spotify bought Anchor and completely crushed the reach that I had on there. So I do better here on YouTube. I'm monetized. That helps. A few bucks every couple of months helps me to support my book habit, which I like. But I want my channel now to go from being more than just, hey, here's a book that I liked or whatever. Like I want it to be more beneficial to you guys. Generally I've assumed that meant that I'm recommending something to you and you might enjoy it, and you'll get a good fiction recommendation out of it. I think now I can keep doing that to an extent, and that's why I've left room in the spreadsheet there to review fiction. But I think the channel could be more beneficial in other ways. And so, and I really liked, running on my treadmill and reading Federalist #2 aloud. Like I want to do more things like that and share the things that I'm learning, not just the things that I'm enjoying. It's not so much about like, getting engagement and feeding the algorithm or whatever. It's, the whole reason that I read is that it entertains me and it enlightens me. And, if the glory of God is intelligence and I'm trying to, constantly read to augment my intelligence, I want to share that with you guys. It's not just about recommending a book that I enjoyed. It's about getting into the nitty gritty details of, why I enjoyed it. What did I benefit from it? So that's the kind of stuff I'll be focusing on with the Herodotus book, and with my analysis of the Federalist Papers and the U.S. Constitution and other important writings. Like, let's talk about things like that. Let's spread the love of reading in that way, and have it be more than just me saying, here's a good book that I liked, you should go read it. Like, I think I can do a little bit better than that. And that's going to be what a lot of next year is about. So once again, that's what next year is going to look like. Like I said, Monday is going to be presidential inaugurations. Tuesday and Wednesday I'll leave open for fiction. Wednesday especially will be for comics. Thursday will be the American Documents videos. Friday, the Federalist Friday part is only going to happen, like I said, on the final Friday of the month. So there will be 6 installments of those. And if I can knock it out in June, if I can get all the way to the end of June and finish all of the Federalist papers, I'm going to go buy the paperback copy of the Anti-Federalist Papers as edited by Herbert J. Storing. There are 85 Federalist Papers. There are around 200 Anti-Federalist Papers, and it's not composed in exactly the same structure, the same way as the Federalist Papers. Nevertheless, they are contemporary and counter arguments to them. Herbert J. Storing compiled and collated 85 of them to correspond with the 85 traditional Federalist Papers. So as part of my ongoing philosophical and historical education, I wanted to familiarize myself with the arguments put forward by the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, because if we ultimately ended up with a federal system, I want to know how we got there. And if I can break it down in a way for my viewing audience here to digest it and appreciate it, then, hey, I've done something useful. But I'm not going to commit to getting to the Anti-Federalist Papers just yet. I need to know if I can keep pace with this along with everything else that I'm doing. On the writing side of things, and this is where we'll close out. So like I said earlier, I finished 3 manuscripts this year. I finished Fossil Force in February, sent that to Raconteur. It got accepted in June, and it got published in October. They do not screw around. Right now, I'm working on the outline for Fossil Force 2. Working title is Deep Trouble. I haven't set any deadlines for myself on that one yet. I've got the rough structure of the entire book set out. Now I'm going through and figuring out chapter breaks, story beats, character moments, things like that. The process that worked to get me to that first book, which I am immensely proud of. Like, A, how well it came together, B, how quickly it came together, and C, the response that I've gotten to it so far. I'm awestruck by the response that I've had to Fossil Force, and I really want to do justice to the sequel. As soon as Fossil Force ended, I went into the new version of Answerable Courage, which is my Pilgrim historical fantasy novel that I've written once or twice before and never was truly satisfied with. When Arc Press launched in January, I looked up their submission process and I filled out their proposal request, sent it off to them, and in February they reached out to me and said, "We like your proposal. We want to see a full manuscript." I told them, "Okay, it's going to take me a couple of months. I can hammer it out, but it's going to take me a few months." They said, "That's fine." From February to June, I blitzed that book and sent it off to them. While I was blitzing that book, they announced the Arc Prize contest. I had an incredibly strong idea for that one. And so I wrote that and sent that off in October. I'm still waiting to hear back on both of those books. Hell or High Water, one of them will be published in 2026. So I guess that's a relief that I already have my 2026 release taken care of. I might publish both of them next year. It depends. If not, I'll hold one over for 2027, and that'll keep me covered for that year. But I am working on Fossil Force 2. I will have at least one other book next year, and I don't want to get too aggressive with my announcements and have to recant anything later, but I've got other irons in the fire. Things are happening. I'm very, very pleased with it, that all the effort that I've been putting into writing lately is finally resulting in something. I do have a couple of other announcements that I have to keep under my hat. I can't say anything about them just yet with regard to existing manuscripts, but things are finally moving. And so that's what the reading side is going to look like next year. That's what the writing side is going to look like next year. And I'm grateful to all of you guys who have stayed subscribed. We're coming up on 4,000 subs. Who knows if I'll hit it this year? We've got 9 days left. So if I don't hit it, whatever. The algorithm really did change this year. Normally I pick up a couple of hundred subs in November and I get tens of thousands more views on my Mayflower video. This year, nothing. Like it's really been flattened. I'm not sure exactly how all that works, but on the plus side, I'm not enslaved to the algorithm. I don't care. I do what I would normally do. Sometimes I point a camera at it, but I will continue to read. I will change a couple of things about the way that I share it with you. I will continue to write. I will continue to publish. And I'm going to continue. I can actually read more of the books that I've bought over the years about how to draw different things, so I can get freaking better at drawing too. But anyway, an hour and 20. The most viewers that we had at one time was 4. Thank you guys for stopping in. Appreciate all of you guys, especially Ben for dropping some comments there in the chat. He's a real one. Love you guys. I'm going to end the stream now. It is almost my bedtime. I got to go to work tomorrow morning. So thank you for watching this whole way through. Drive safe. See you out there.